We are live. My name's Steve Jaguar.
And I'm Mike Foster.
All right, cool. In this episode, we are going to have all sorts of good stuff. It's been a pretty lively week. We're going to talk about common footballs. That's not what I meant. Pitfalls. Jenkins attack framework. Heroku for AWS. A couple new vulnerabilities that we'll get into the weeds on. And a bit of tool time. We're going to tackle Trivy. So, welcome.
Welcome to the show. Yes, a lot better week than last week. It's picked up a little bit. Got really excited for the Trivy demo at the end. Haven't seen Trivy in a little while since the CKS, so excited for that. If you are interested and you want to share this stuff out, like, subscribe, and we love a good YouTube share, a good Twitch share. Really appreciate all the support for everybody that's joining, and let us know what you want to see next. We're constantly trying to shuffle the show around, so maybe we'll end up in a stable version soon, and love to hear from you.
What are we in now?
I don't know. Well, this is episode 17. So what is this? 0.17 version? I don't know.
All right, I can back that. All right, cool. Mm-hmm. You usually say this. Did we do the usual? If you're watching this later on YouTube, please subscribe, tell your friends, give us a thumbs up, and follow us on Twitch so you can watch us live on Fridays. But maybe if we not if we go production, we might move off Fridays. Should we say that now? We're thinking about it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wanted to see what the crowd's feeling. But we were thinking about it because Fridays, things are opening up. We're getting to summer. I don't know if we want to bother people on Friday afternoons. I don't know. We're just throwing it out there. So let us know in the comments if you want to see this at a better time. We were thinking maybe Monday, maybe a wake up Monday. Here's what you need to know.
It's all time zone specific. This is a total self-serving act because for me, when we go live, Friday 5 p.m., that actually is pub o'clock. So instead of doing the virtual pub, I'm doing with all of you and yourself.
Yes. Yeah, I just get jealous on stream. It's fine.
You might have to see real humans at that point, and everyone will be in the pub. Nobody will watch. So please leave a comment. Let us know.
Yeah. All right. On to
do number one.
The stuff. Yeah. So how to avoid 20 common security failures in software development. This is your common pitfalls, and somewhat of a self-serving shout out to my co-host over here as he was featured in the article. Yeah, a nice little blurb. Really a big, I got to read through it. I thought it was pretty spot on, and I like the way they wrote the article with all the different feedback from really a bunch of different well-known people in general. I think it's a good take. I like when you get these blurbs because I feel like it's a little less pitchy and more real. There's one underneath yours. I'm not saying I really liked your blurb, but I forget who was underneath yours, and they had a good one.
This is coders are not trained in security.
Oh no, sorry, it was a 2 under. Who are we making shift left? And I like that
good
because
one.
I was you touched on it, and then it was like well formatted because they expanded on it. And it's like, coders and developers, they're not really focused on security, but they really shouldn't have to be. You're not supposed to shift security tools into developers' hands. You're supposed to shift security and context and information to them so they can make the right decisions when it's needed. But you shouldn't be overwhelming them, right? So I never really understood this, what this shift left. It's like we had developers, then we piled Kubernetes on developers. Now we're piling security on developers. It doesn't really make sense to me, right? Anyways,
it's good. And to give some context on the authors there, CISO Series are a podcast, and they also do security headlines like through Alexa and things like that. You can ask for the security headlines, and it'll be these guys telling you what's new and exciting, which is something I do actually, which feeds into this show. And they ask people in the industry. This dude down here, you can barely see his name on the screen, David Spark. When he has a certain subject, he pings people who he knows in the industry and says, "What do you think?" Like he wouldn't have asked me about firewalls or something like that. I just happened to be on the list for that one. So, and thankfully he used my bit. But it's a really good article, and it isn't biased. It's not a vendor article.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's a ton of good spots in here. Like we're all running our businesses on the same broken software. Are there too many open source tools? Is another one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do we have enough open source software? Yeah, it's pretty good. I really recommend the article, and it's a great read. Yeah, honestly, pretty funny. I found some good quotes in there.
Yeah, excellent. All right, good. A little bit of a shameless plug, but a good article and worthwhile. Mm-hmm. The next one, I kind of wished we could have done it as a tool time, and we might, right, someday. But it was a little complicated. For me, it was just funny because red teaming Jenkins with the Jenkins attack framework. This is Accenture, and it's like today we are releasing the Jenkins attack framework to the public because Jenkins is just ridiculously insecure. Should never be facing the outside world. Isn't designed for that. There are lots of vulnerabilities. They actually state this blog post does not introduce any new vulnerabilities discovered in Jenkins, but demonstrates ways they can be abused by red time operators. So if you are a security professional working in an enterprise organization that uses Jenkins, your Jenkins probably has all sorts of private information and keys and access to the keys to the kingdom. You can use this framework to check it out.
And when people talk about Jenkins, do they normally separate Jenkins away from all the plugins? Because I feel like it gets used interchangeably. I feel like a lot of the vulnerabilities do come from the plugins as well, right?
I think that's yes. I'm going to say yes to that. But I think if you get access to, it depends how, it's a good point. How are they're looking at access to credentials, access to the API for Jenkins. So I think they're kind of encompassing that in, but
yeah, as an all-in-one thing.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's cool. It's cool. I wouldn't mind taking it for a spin someday. But I think it was really interesting to see organizations releasing information like this.
Yeah, a framework just for Jenkins, I think is.
Yeah, it deserves it.
Pretty funny. Yeah, for sure. Worth the read. All right.
Worth the read. You want to start on the next one?
Heroku.
We call this Heroku for AWS, right? That was actually what they're calling it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know where I saw it called that. It must have been on Reddit or something. Some smart
AWS app runner. Heroku. Yeah, this is just another pin in AWS's cap, right? I think they took another sort of open source project, and now there's App Runner. So a fully managed container application service, easy for customers without any prior containers or infrastructure experience. I don't know about that, but yeah, I think you're going to see sort of this proliferation of container services now. I don't think Kubernetes itself is just pretty complicated, and people want to make the transition. So it's tough. I think you're seeing a lot more managed services, and at the end, I think you're just getting another abstraction up, right? So it was bare metal, and then it was VMs, and then you had all your VMs managed, and it was, whether it was like Zen server or vSphere or whatever it was. And then now it's okay, well, you have your VMs managed. Now you need an orchestration layer either on top or below, depending on how you set it up. And that's going to be managed too. And at the end of the day, if you're a developer and you want to get started, it's pretty easy to drop a container and get going. The issue is what happens when you want to scale, because those are some pretty expensive services that you're paying for. And they always get you too, because all these big platforms, hey, you're starting a business and you have a good idea and it brings value to somebody somewhere, drop it in containers and run it. Here's $50,000 in credits. And you're just like, okay, well, we can get our business going, get going. And then your year of credits runs out and you're looking at the bill like, holy crap. Now what happens when we have to scale? Right. And I mean, Corey Quinn does a great job at this. It just how convoluted some of these systems are and where they make their money. So it's just one that, like, yes, it's easy. And I always tell people when I was back more in consulting, like, yeah, you want to make the shift to containers and Kubernetes, that I really think it's dishonest when people sell you it's going to be cheaper in the long run. Maybe, but definitely not in the first 2 years.
Yeah.
I just don't see it.
Not in the first, well, you're saying not in the first 2 years. That's a nice sort of get out, because has anybody achieved it?
It's just a transition. It's a transitory period, right? Like, you're in VMs, you have a culture shift, you have a knowledge gap, you have maybe some sort of platform service or contract you need to get out of. Like, there's so much overhead in that shift. Once you make the culture shift, I think obviously containers and Kubernetes allow you to do so much more with your services, but you also need the knowledge, because, like, let's say you decide, hey, we want to move our database to Kubernetes. Like, oh, that was a bad idea. It's costly. Those changes are a lot. So
surely the leaders in our industries, the Spotifys and the Netflix, they're getting it right.
Yes.
But
hopefully.
That is, they started early, and
Spotify had one of my favorite talks. I think it was in 2018 at KubeCon, where they talked about how they crashed production twice and their services never went down. If anybody's looking for a good chaos engineering talk, the engineers got up on stage and talked about how Terraform basically took their European and US services out, and they had zero downtime, and they did it twice.
Who was that? Would you say that was Spotify?
Yeah.
I heard about that. And that was interesting. I was having a conversation this week, and that actually thing came up. And it was because I was talking about drift, essentially, between infrastructure as code and the difficulty at that time in determining drift between what is actually happening and what you think is happening. And so you just go apply.
Yep. And what they did is they didn't realize that, because obviously Terraform State took in all 3 clusters and looked at all their workloads in 3 states, and they wanted to make a change to 1 cluster. But when they did it, they actually pulled a separate Terraform branch because they wanted to make change to the 1 cluster. And that state was still there. And it's like, oh, you don't have those 2 clusters in this state, remove. Yeah. And so it's just one of the issues with something that's declarative, right? Because if it's not there, it's gone, versus something that's imperative. If you're doing Ansible and you wanted to create 10 more servers or fix that one, you don't necessarily run into that issue. So it was the new way of thinking when they adopted Terraform that needed to change, right? It's those little gaps that cost a lot. Anyways, rambling done. AWS.
So new form of thinking.
App runner.
Good. AWS app runner. Yeah, that went off in a direction. Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Our next big news is, I didn't actually put this up, but I'd skip to it. Free book. Can we put that link just in? Can we just paste that into the chat?
Yeah.
It'll be if you're watching on YouTube, go down and look at the notes. It'll be there. But if you're watching right now, this was sent to us by our good pal, Michael Mann, who said, got excited. Free book, put it on your show. Essentially, it's software engineering. It's a Google release on O'Reilly. And it's like, it's not massive. Let me just see if I'm going to bring it up in 2 seconds so you can get a sneak preview.
There he is.
There it is. It's in the chat. And how long is it actually? It's just a good idea. A little bit of light reading. Only, wait for it. Wait for it. If you want to be a software engineer at Google, you're going to want to wait for this. It's only, wait for it, not very long, 602 pages.
Yeah, light read.
Lessons learned from programming over time.
Yeah.
There it is.
It's going to be a long time. A lot of lessons learned after 602 pages. Take notes. So if somebody else do the homework for us and report back, we'll bring you on the show.
Yeah. It's an easy way to get a guest spot.
Exactly.
Killer. Cool. All right. So the next one you popped in here, it was about cybersecurity job openings.
Yeah, it was a good transition. You read the book and then you get a job somewhere, because there's, I always see these reports of there's this many job openings in tech and this many job openings everywhere, this many job openings. And I'm just like, is there really? Are people really hiring that much? I see the need for it, but this has been this way for a couple of years / 20 years. Correct me if I'm wrong, Steve. It's always some prediction. Yeah. Since
the beginning of time itself, there has been a desire for more cybersecurity people. And when I used to, back in the earlier days of my security fear mongering, we used to say to developers that if you want to transition into being sort of a DevSecOps person or a security professional from a development background, you will not have a problem getting a job. We used to say 2 million. By 2020, last year, there will be 2 million cybersecurity positions open for you, and everyone must be so disappointed to see that there are only 465,000.
I also, seriously, what a drop. I also, what makes up a cybersecurity professional?
I don't know.
Exactly. I'm sitting here. I'm like, if you're a developer and you take security into your code and you have some automation that you build in and you're thinking about it, but your focus is developing, you cybersecurity professional, right? Or is it somebody like with the specific title? Because I think that they have a loose definition of what cybersecurity is to say 500,000 or 2 million.
I don't know what they mean by that. They talk about pen testers, network security engineers. I mean, just straight up, the obvious. If that's just obvious roles, the unobvious one brings that number quite a bit.
Mm-hmm. What are the other things they call this out here? It's not rocket science, but you can't just walk into the job, right?
That's not bad assessment.
I also wonder if being online now in a remote world changes how easy it is to bring in cybersecurity professionals, because there isn't as much mentoring, there isn't as much hands-on work, there isn't as much shadowing. So I'm wondering if that makes the barrier a little bit harder for people.
I think general definitely thoughts? Yeah, for sure. Like some of the known cybersecurity professionals out there, like do I have a sticker behind me? I think I have a sticker right there on my Guinness, which is the We Hack Purple sticker. All they focus on is trying to fix the education issue so that people have an on-ramp into cybersecurity. So there's definitely, if you're in cybersecurity, it becomes woefully apparent that it's actually not that easy to get into it. I got lucky because I was working for a company that wasn't doing cybersecurity, and we got acquired by one who was. And suddenly I was in cybersecurity. Woohoo! Mm-hmm. And that's just things like that happen, and you're like, all right. But to have a desire through your coding career to become that, not quite all that clear.
Yeah, and I mean, there's constant shift in tools, right? Like you can go to college and have a specific track, and then you get in, you got to do Kubernetes network policies or something like that, right? Unless schools are catching up, there's still a gap between what you learn and how you get brought in, right?
Oh yeah, totally. And sometimes you're doing security and you don't realize you are. Like when you just said you're learning Kubernetes network policies, it's like, hey, welcome to security.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah,
Nevertheless,
I thought it was a kind of a funny thing. All right, leading into the real security stuff. We got two CVEs for y'all out there this week. Pretty big one to start. Oh, I thought you were going with the other one. All right, so not so big one to start. It's all good.
All right.
So we have the holes in EndpointSlice validations. So enable you to host network hijacks. Now it's rated low. EndpointSlices are very low on the list of things that people even know about, but really it's something that you use at scale. As you know, like pods get IPs assigned to them. And if you want to manage them at scale, it's useful to look at these pod IPs as like an EndpointSlice. So you say, yeah, well, Steve was looking at production Kubernetes, looking at, hey, what are EndpointSlices? And
what the hell are these?
You show me how small the little section is for them.
This is the book, right? It's a pretty big book. It's new. And I found it on page 137. If you're looking, there's a little paragraph there that is making reference to scaling. It's not particularly big, so don't feel bad if you didn't know.
But so EndpointSlices are a Kubernetes object. They pull pod IPs and sort of manage them all as a group. Now you can change the pod IPs can't be changed on the local host or link local range, but you can change the EndpointSlice object. So that was sort of the issue. I've never been in the situation where I've used EndpointSlices, so I really don't know the impact. It was rated low, so I'm assuming the amount of use cases this impacts and slash like who could do it is pretty limited. Is fixed though in the new versions. So upgrade.
Yep. Upgrade.
And then
everyone's upgrading right now.
On to the more serious stuff.
Just click straight over to this one. The Symlink Exchange attack. This is on Red Hat. Was it found by Red Hat researchers? Do you know? Because that's the first place we saw it.
I believe so. So there, a lot of the developers, obviously, because Red Hat works primarily upstream Kubernetes, work with like Runc and because it bleeds into OpenShift, right? So I have a feeling either it was probably found by the group who develops with Runc, and there's going to be Red Hat developers in that group. That's my guess. Yeah. It's one of the reasons why Red Hat tends to be out in front of a lot of these CVEs at the get-go. Yeah.
And there is a good description of it, which is not on this link, oddly. But it was essentially, to try and summarize, the technical summary is a little weak here. It was talking about essentially if you're mounting a host mount that has a symlink that mounts the host, say the root, where that path also has the mount that you're mounting. Did I confuse things enough? It resolves through the symlink, and you can mount anyway. It can give you access.
It mounts an extra mount. Yeah, it's if you're asking for go ahead. This was similar to one of the other vulnerabilities I think we had last year, right? I think it might have just been Docker though, and not Runc. Yeah, you basically you're doing a mount in Runc and you manage to mount the whole root volume through an extra symlink that's created.
Essentially, yeah. It doesn't look like it's that hard to reproduce, which is probably why it's a 7.5. Mm-hmm. But you need to have gotten in early to have created the weird, almost like chicken or egg scenario where you've created the intentional symlink to mount the vulnerable root that the container is going to mount. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It's like you're already on the host.
You have to mount. You need to do, it's two steps from what I saw is there has to be a specific mount that you're able to do with Runc, and then there's another command I think where you could run to mount the host root file system. Now this can all be limited, like if you run SE Linux or you have some sort of security service that checks syscalls for extra mounts, like that would get flagged right away.
Right.
Like privilege escalation and things like that. If you have SE Linux and you say you can't mount anything from root, it wouldn't be able to do it. It's just one of those things that is overlooked. And if you don't have a security service, you're gonna get caught.
That's probably the message here, isn't it? It's one of those things where SE Linux or a variety of security tooling and policy there's lots of ways around it. So
yeah,
but it's nevertheless a 7.5 because if you had full access to the system and you wanted to simulate it and try it, you can do it.
Yep. Yeah, go break your own clusters.
All right. Go break your own. Well, I think it'd be fun to try. All right. So we are at a new section.
Yeah, we're on to the crazy stuff. Welcome.
Okay. What is the first one?
A pretty funny article. It's
yeah.
IT exec writes the worst article ever. You want to take this one?
That was definitely a Reddit comment that posted the Hill. Our cybersecurity industry teach industry best practices, in quotes. They keep allowing breaches. I guess they're citing the colonial pipeline. Why not, right? We're going to talk about that in a moment. But it's a very thrifty read as you go through, but where they're talking about blaming CISOs and firing them. Never hire a CISO if they've ever experienced a breach, which is like, that's actually the opposite. One strike and you're out. Holistic approaches, paper savvy information security professionals. This guy, whoever wrote this, is an unhappy individual. Alan Gwynn, opinion contributor, IT professional. This is why we need DevSecOps. We need to talk more. We need to sit at the same table. And some of these reactions are the exact opposite, like that, of what you should do in terms of referring to best practices. Did you glean anything? I'm going to read the comments at the end.
Yeah, the whole one strike you're out CISO thing. I don't know. It's just more of a referendum on how people view security, right? It's when it's going right, nobody bats an eye. When it's going wrong, the world's on fire. So it's a more thankless job, I'd say, than a lot of other things. But that tends to be IT in a nutshell.
Like, we already have this 400,000 jobs that we need more security people, and this guy's firing them, the ones we have.
Yeah, when they mess up. I also think it's a lack of understanding of what makes systems secure.
Yes,
because just
for sure.
There's a little bit of, if like, let's say some hacking collective decides we're going to target your business and we're not going to stop until we find a hole in it, they're probably going to find a hole eventually if they have the resources to keep going at you, right?
Yeah,
because it's going to be you, or it's going to be a human like downloading something, or it's going to be something. It just really depends on if it's targeted, right?
Or some very well-crafted phishing. Anyone can fall for that. It's funny. So now the even funnier bit that I thought, this is already ridiculous. Let me bring this up. So the editor, I'm going to guess, got a lot of flack for this. And so the editor's note here, if you can read that. Professor Gwynn states that his column included what is likely to have been the worst wording I have ever used in my life. Suggested that he favored willy-nilly firing of a whole staff of people after a security incident. My intent was to hold leadership accountable. There we go. Implement a one-striking hiring policy for information security leadership. Anyway, rotate leadership. Do not let it happen twice. Weed out and avoid hiring that former information security leader. So he's kind of backtracking, but he's not really.
Yeah. Well, so like, let's say you're a CISO and you have all the right protocols and you do all the right things, but then somebody in marketing falls for a phishing issue. Is that?
Yeah.
I mean, realistically, you probably, like, let's say you're using AD or something like that. You probably should have your network set up so that that marketing terminal and machine can't infect anything else. So yeah, there might be a conversation about that. But like, it's really the CISO's fault. Like, some things are to a certain extent out of your hands, and you can't lock down everybody on their machines and say you can't do anything to be totally secure. It's just not reasonable, right? You just need to have a little bit of an approach. Now, that being said, I think negligence and holding people accountable makes sense, as we'll probably talk about in literally the next article, because this leads into the next one that we saw, which is an article talking about CEOs facing jail time for breaches.
Oh, yeah.
And this is one that I kind of wanted to talk about, especially with the people watching. At what point do people like to draw the line about what's accountable or not? Right? Did you find it?
Yep.
Yeah.
CEOs face jail time for IoT attacks by 2024. That's a little small. Let's bring it up.
And it's an interesting line. I don't think that they're really going to be able to prosecute anybody for something like this unless it's very, very clear cut. Because the law just really doesn't work when it's, a couple decisions removed like that. But I think it's more of the threat of saying, hey, you need to do X, Y, Z. And I had this conversation, I think, with you, Steve, before. Do you think it would work better if we incentivized security judgments instead of decentivized them? So let's say you're doing audits. Government comes in and says, if you're X business and you're in IT, we're going to take X percentage to make sure and to come and do audits from you. If you pass the audit or you're doing specific things to make sure that you're secure, we're going to give you that money back, or we're going to give you a bonus back or something like that. Because right now you're just, hey, there's something happens. You're encouraging everybody to put out fires and cover their own asses. And you create this, let's say.
I think that, yeah, there is I think that's I guess a valiant idea. Maybe it's whether it can be executed. I think things like this come from people who, like we said in the last article, not really understanding how security works. It's not a case of, do I have enough fire hydrants in the building, or do I have enough lifeboats on the Titanic to make sure that when disaster strikes, you didn't have enough lifeboats, therefore the captain is he's dead anyway. All right, well, so, but they think that's what it is, and that somehow accountability can just happen. A few years back when GDPR came into effect, and before, when people were like, oh, GDPR is coming, if there's a breach and there happens to be European people in it, even if you're in America, suddenly you could be fined 4% of your gross revenue, which if you reverse engineered that to any previous breach, was way more than anyone had ever been fined. And so, but then the security industry was just like, well, how do you prove it? How do you prove that somebody was negligent? How do you prove they did everything they could do? And using the same example you mentioned, a phishing attack that goes to marketing that looks like it came from the CEO. Click here to find out why we're not giving you a bonus this year. What? Screw you, CEO. Click.
Yeah.
And away you go. It's, yeah. I think, I guess there's both the negative enforcement and the positive enforcement that you're suggesting. The positive is clearly better, but the negative is also a little bit suffers from a lack of education as to how we can do things. I don't have the answer.
I think a lot of it comes down to resources too. If you think about it, I think the reason why you're saying we're doing 4% of revenue, you're looking because you really are only going to apply this law to the big ones. You're going to apply this to the Googles. You're going to apply this to the Microsofts, because realistically, doing a whole cybersecurity audit with professionals who make a good chunk of money probably in their day-to-day, and now you have to hire a bunch of them. You have to track people down. You have to go internally and pull all those records. It's a huge chunk of change just to research the issue and dig in and investigate, and then to come out empty-handed after all that. That's a big. But I guess the thought is, if they go 4% and they hit on maybe 1 in every 3 cases that get brought up for GDPR, then they might recoup the money back enough. But it's more of the threat, I think, than anything with laws, right? It's never. Laws are there. There's a couple of different reasons to laws. One of them is you don't necessarily need to follow through on it, but it's the disincentive. You're disincentivizing a specific behavior. And so we're saying, hey, you guys need to make sure you lock down because you don't want to get dragged into this. You probably are going to win, and you probably have hotshot lawyers that you pay for because you're big IT companies, but it's bad for business. It's bad PR, and we'd rather not do it to you, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Facebook's been knocked a few times on it, and you can't always escape. Continuously a few times, perpetually getting knocked with provable, roughly provable negligence of some sort. So it is that. It is generally, it's just a threat of, well, if I don't tell you how to prove it, then you're going to go further than doing the bare minimum of compliance.
Yeah, and I'm rambling a little bit now, but the Facebook one, for example, with the data tables, a lot of the laws said that you couldn't tie personal information to data, right?
Mm-hmm.
So normally what you do is you randomize the numbers in the data that's coming in, but there was no actual personal name tied to the Facebook data. What they did was they didn't randomize the numbers of the data they collected. So you could go through and say, okay, well, number one has this information. And on the same data sheet or data information that we were sending out to other people, number one was the same. So you could cross-link them, figure out all the information. If you spent the time, you could reasonably put together who it was. Didn't technically necessarily violate the law though, right? And so then it's, okay, well, we need to make it illegal to not randomize how you collect data. Not randomize,
and that's
to randomize
a pretty
it.
Advanced. That's a pretty advanced bit of knowledge for an auditor checking a government policy to know, right? So this is where it's a bit, who knows?
It's almost to the point where I was having this conversation. IT just moves too fast for legal review, and even if I break a law, I know it's going to be tied up in courts for a year and a half. Yeah. By that time, I moved past it. So it's like you're prosecuting me on something that I fixed, right? I mean, it's a good check and balance, but it's
It's funny. I mean, and what's funny, people talk about like stock value dropping and reputation and la. Check Equifax's stock. Is it lower than it was before the Equifax breach? No. They have this. You could almost write some AI bot, clever people watching this, that looked for cyber breaches, watch the company, sees if their stock does this, and I bet you could machine learn all the other ones that have happened and go, yep, the hype cycle is exactly 1 week.
Buy the dip.
Wait, I'm gonna sell, buy, and sell, and you could have a bot just making you millions.
Yeah, buy the dip. All right, I think we have. We have 2 more WTFs. So we're getting to the colonial. Oh, did you just pull this one up? Oh yeah, okay. We have more colonial, more pipeline. Yeah. Oh, that's right. So yeah, you want to take this one?
Something dark side. The ransomware people who you commented on them like, we just want to help the little guy and screw the big companies. We're like, okay, sorry, our servers were seized, country not named. Advertising patterns not transferred to an unknown account. All the money is gone, and oops, sorry, everyone.
Yeah, this is just this is what happens. This is like playing Grand Theft Auto when you get too much heat on you. This is all right. Let's just disband all our servers, move, burn everything, hide the Bitcoin, say that we're breaking up, and they'll pop up in a year or two, right?
Dark side organizers have released decryption for anybody who didn't pay the ransom yet.
There you go.
So they say. It's just like the whole thing just.
That's a gesture of goodwill saying, FBI, please do not come after me. Well, actually, they're outside the country, so that would be like CIA, right? But same deal. They got too much heat, and they're like, sorry.
And they're like, we're out of here. Bye. Our servers were seized. All the Bitcoin's gone. Bye. Here's some decryption. Stop coming after us, please. So that was pretty funny. That's kind of it doesn't look very nation state, does it? It looks like some people who just went, oh shit.
Yeah, I always wonder how politics uses the nation state sort of funding thing. Because let's say like you're the big US government. I feel like it's almost impossible to track how much money flows into where. So it's one of those things where maybe you weren't funded directly by the government, but maybe they funded some sort of IT program that funds some sort of sponsorship program that funds X. And they get like some sort of sponsorship through it for some other product that they do, but in their extra time, they do hacking. Do you know what I mean? Technically, It's kind of fungible. It's not really sponsored, but you could make the link. I always just, because it's like, where do these people get funding? Although we didn't post the article, but they've made $90 or $95 million in Bitcoin.
Yeah.
So it's like maybe
that was last week. It's only 35 million this week because
is it?
Bitcoin's plummeted now.
Oh yeah, true.
I don't think they're too upset about it though.
Yeah. Either way, yeah, it's a funny thing. And then the last one was the Cyberinsurance company that got ransomware.
Well, the first, you can handle this one.
Yeah. Cyberinsurance giant is AXA?
AXA, that's my insurance company.
AXA? Yeah.
Yeah.
I hadn't heard of them before, but got hit by a ransomware attack after saying it would stop covering ransom payments. I love Graham. Like, well, this is awkward. It's perfect.
Yeah.
Ouch.
There you go. AXA, underlying policies. Yeah. Oops. Well, there we go. Now that they found out how easy it is, I suppose. Excellent.
Yeah. It's I don't know if it's karma, but it's just kind of funny.
It's karma. It's a wonderful irony.
Irony, right. That's probably a better word for it. Okay, on to
new section.
The big stuff. Yes. Great intro. This has been announced for a little while, but yeah, I think we wanted to talk about it. Styra with the 40 million in funding. And this is, I think they're B series.
Yeah, there it is. Series B, 40 million.
Series B. I think they got 15 in the first round. Yeah, so good chunk of change. I know they're growing. If you're looking for something there,
they're hiring like crazy.
They're hiring. Yeah. And this sort of goes into the whole, policy as code movement, I think, that you're starting to see now. So I'm interested to see where they take this project, because there are obviously that space is heating up. There's a couple different competitors in that space. So it's definitely going to be an interesting move. Do you have any thoughts on this?
It makes sense. It is reflective of why we have this section. The market's hot. So every week we get to talk about some ridiculous amount of money being thrown at some company that, whether they're making any money or not, they're getting funding. Open Policy Agent is one thing they're doing an exceptional job of, is being extremely involved with the CNCF and working to establish OPA as kind of the de facto policy language and solution.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, and they're the original developers of OPA are on this project too, right? With Styra.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Which is big.
I think it's cool. Where OPA doesn't get a lot of traction. Well, actually, no, it's not true. OPA does get tons of traction. Styra doesn't get a lot of traction. I think an announcements like this will, for some people, will go, who? They make Open Policy Agent? Okay. Like, it's one of those. It was like when we talked to the Kyberno guy, and he's from Nirmata, and I was like, who? Okay, that's who does Kyberno. Cool. There's a lot of, all of these wonderful policy tools have someone obviously behind them that actually kind of came out of stealth, and here they are. And they're looking at Open Policy Agent like way beyond what we might think of it being used for Kubernetes. They're looking at authorization, authentication for anything, pretty much as an abstraction layer. So
I think it's cool how all these open source projects are getting funding and getting companies built around the project. I think it speeds up I think it just speeds up the ecosystem even faster, because it's not like you have these open source projects that just kind of wither on the vine and die. Some of them obviously are open source that's been contributed from something that's already been produced, but taking from something that is out there and constantly funneling development into it, I think that's how you keep projects alive, and you keep them just sort of being relevant. Because to a certain extent, like if your developers leave your project, it's pretty tough, right? Like, yeah, you need both. You need a good use case for it, and you also need the developers and the vision behind where you want to push it. So it's really cool to have, for example, the OPA people behind it, like working on a company. And it's like, if you like open source, now you get paid to contribute to open source along with, going and helping people. So it's cool.
Well, it's like Cilium and Isovalent.
Yeah, exactly.
All the same people. There's a potential for a commercial model behind whatever it is you want to do with this. With it could be Cilium or it could be OPA. If you're going to scale that to the moon in your organization, you might want some professional help with that, and it makes sense that there's something commercial behind it.
For
Very
sure.
cool. That is a good one. Well done, Styra. And now, what do we got next?
We got the finale.
Does everybody know what time it is?
Dun, dun.
All right, this could blow up in my face really badly, because there's one thing I really wanted to show, and that's new. And let me just bring it up on the screen. So I would imagine a lot of people on here are familiar with Trivy. It's been around for a while. It back as long as, I don't know, 2 years ago, before some of you were born, everybody used Claire for image scanning. And Claire was kind of weird and clunky, and it had a database and it had an API. It was API only. It didn't even have a command line. Like, so you had to, it was designed to be incorporated into CI or whatever, or some kind of other packaging. And then Tepe Fukudo comes along and he writes Trivy. And he actually, one of the more creative things about Trivy was that the database itself was in Git. So you were running Trivy on the command line. It would check the database Git repo, which is there, it's public, and it would download the delta of the new vulnerabilities and run and scan, and thus making it command line friendly, fast, and perpetually updating itself, so you were never behind on what vulnerabilities you were going to be scanning for. And that was freaking awesome. And so back when I worked at Aqua, I'd like to say they acquired Trivy. They essentially acquired the guy, right? They went, dude, this is awesome. You're going to come work for us. And good old Tepe upped his roots in Japan and moved to Tel Aviv. A guy barely spoke English, let alone Hebrew. So that is a pair of nuts to do that. And that was awesome. So at the time, there's bad documentation, and it roughly, do I have my thing over here? So I was playing with it. So I was about to do this kind cluster, but before I cripple my computer with that, Trivy is pretty straightforward in that if you just run Trivy and you don't mistype. The latest is 18.2, I think is what I've got there. It scans images, so you can do like the really simple stuff. By the way, if you want to install it, it's brew Aqua Security, all one word, /Trivy/Trivy. Why it's so long, I don't know. When it first came out, it was just brew install Trivy. They made it slightly more complicated, but whatever, it works. You can just go Trivy. You have to say image. It used to just be when it only did images. You didn't have to do that. You can say Alpine. Give me an Alpine version.
2.0, 3.0. What are the versions that are? You can also see what is supported, I believe, too, right? Yeah, 3.13, sure.
Yeah. So what it does first is it's just going to it synchronizes its database, and then it scans, and that's pretty. And so if you're vague about the number, like I was, 3.13, it goes and grabs the latest dot release of that. So you can see 3.13.3. I'm looking for a base image. Jackpot. I have 0 vulnerabilities, right?
That's also because it's the latest release.
Well, that does help. I could be specific. I could do that.
Sure. Try it out.
And then if that is a released release, so I guess I should use the latest.
Well, the latest, so 3.13.5 is the latest as of April 14th, which makes sense that necessarily the vulnerabilities haven't caught up quite yet. Yeah, one of the, so Trivy is actually the CKS, and this is one of the things that comes up.
Yeah. Gives
is
CKS context.
Yeah, CKS context, and it's really good. A lot of it is just figuring out the workflow to say, okay, are my containers vulnerable or not, and which one should I stop, which one should I get rid of, which one should I leave. And it's really kind of simple. It's like you use this tool, you look at it, it's giving you the severity of high, but you also could look at this and say, hey, maybe I don't need this package in my container. I go and remove it.
Right.
Upstream. Right.
You got it.
So it's an information tool. Yeah, exactly. So there's a lot in here. Knowing the versions helps. It's also why people should have some sort of process of how they bring images in. It's like if you're going to use Alpine as a base, you need some sort of policy around it. It's like you can give developers an Alpine image to work with, but you need some sort of check, right? Anyways.
Exactly. Exactly.
Back to Trivy.
So what is cool about it recently, just when I moved out of Aqua, they'd released the client server version so that you could run Trivy somewhere and say, I'm a server. So if you check, it's actually really straightforward. You just say Trivy server, and then that's what maintains the database. And then you say Trivy client, and rather than it keep the database up to date, there's that delay when I started, it goes to check the database. Now it just asks the server, and now you have a local communication. It just makes the whole thing so much faster if you're running Trivy a lot in CI or something, right? That was a new addition. I was like, that's really cool. And then some expected releases happened just at the end of last year, which was, let me put that up to the top, the ability to do file system, which is nothing to do with, it kind of can be an image. If you unpack an image, it'll scan it as if it would scan an image. But it doesn't have to be. If you've got something like any of the lock files, essentially, if you've got like a pip file lock or a gem lock or any of those files that gives you, this is what's actually going to be in here, it uses those package manager devices to say what's in this file system, compare it, and give you vulnerabilities as if it were scanning an image. That was new. That's actually not old at all to this, which I thought I was pretty impressed with that. And then scanning a remote repository was like a no-brainer. That's just give it a GitHub and it will go scan it like the same as it does with file system and image. So these were all fine. I was cool with that. But what I didn't know at all about was this plugin. Did you seen this one?
No, this is new to me.
It is new. It's I just about dropped the F-bomb. It is cool. So let me break everything by doing this. So let's do the example. I really think it's a great. What is this? I've got to get rid of that on this new computer. You
just
ditched Mac
press
already.
Press the little copy thing there. Command.
Yeah, thanks. How frustrating was that for you?
Yeah, my first MK docs.
What did that?
Oh, it doesn't like you now.
Oh, hold on.
No.
Is it copying the?
Yeah, they put
$1.
Yeah, I think it's MK docs that they're using, and so
now
what are you doing?
Fool
just
now.
Command A, go to the top, backspace, or you do that. Sure. Yep.
All right, so I should have that one now.
All right,
and now I should be able to scan a deployment that is running using kubectl scan deployment. Now I don't have a deployment. Do you have a deployment running? This is why on my new laptop I was just going to do a kube create client cluster and do it. But on my other laptop I did this, and it was essentially I just chose a crappy deployment that had an Nginx in it, and it was like I just scanned the image. So I got the same results as if I just ran Trivy image Nginx. If it happens to be, it grabs the deployment manifest out, looks for image or images, and then goes scan, and does the scans as if they're there. And I was like, "That okay? That's awesome."
You think about what it's doing in the background is pretty much when you're doing the kube control, it's probably grabbing the manifest, sorting through the YAML or /JSON, it'll be JSON, pulling the image and image tag, and then just running what it normally would if you ran it locally. Right.
Yeah.
That's probably the workflow, I'm guessing.
I think you're totally right. It's just doing a loop on the JSON on the image tag.
But I mean, at the end of the day, like it's great. The best thing too is if you're in the CKS, that'd be sweet, because just you got to go through and look at what the images are and stuff. If you could just go kube control Trivy, scroll, like go and pull all of these, that would be the fastest way to get through certain questions. So
right, and check this other bit too, which you'll probably like. You don't even have to install it. You just go Trivy plugin, run the plugin from GitHub, and then do it there.
Oh,
so it's
awesome.
It's running the plugin once on the fly. So if it's
That's
not
sweet.
even there, or say you can't write to the wherever you are, you can run
Yeah.
it like that. That's super
awesome.
cool, right? I don't know of any other plugins. It's kind of beta. I think if you look at it, it even says like it might change, but
yeah, I think it's pretty applicable though. I mean, it's something to, if you wanted to talk about like DevSecOps, you want to go and figure out what your developers are doing without having to bother them. You just go into your dev cluster and run this in the background. I mean, hell, you could run a cron job with this, right? That just goes and says, hey, go and pull all the containers running in our dev cluster and spit this out as a report.
I think
take a data. There's better ways to do it. I'm just saying it takes a data set up and you'd get basically reports of if there are any like new images running.
So we might it might be worth extending this at some point, this demo, because if you look at Aqua's other open source project, which came out late last year, called Starboard creates CRDs of report result types, and I can imagine that's why they made this, because Starboard uses Trivy to find out what's running now and allows you to use kubectl with Starboard to go get, well, what's vulnerable now. So that whole
Starboard was pulling the objects and running them through Trivy and then just formatting them, kind of thing. And then what they've done is they've just added that functionality into the CLI. Yeah, that makes sense in terms of engineering time too and overall effort. It's pretty smart though. It's a good use case. Yeah,
very good. Go on.
Well, I was going to say too that one of the best things I'd say about this workflow is it's not necessarily Kubernetes specific, right? So like these Trivy tools, and we talk a lot about Kubernetes, but there is so much more in the container world and container image scanning. There's always going to be a place for it, right? In the different ways people use it. So it's a big one. And if you want to use in Kubernetes, it needs more context. I'd be interested to see Starboard if they take, it's like there's the reports for the containers, like do they take deployment context into consideration or not, right? Because it's a little bit more if you have a vulnerability in the container versus if you have a misconfiguration too.
You got it. Yeah, and that was something at Stackworks we used to talk about a lot. And there's that creating that auto prioritization. I don't know. You got to think that maybe that's coming. Very good.
I think it has to be, because there are definitely some security tools that just focus on containers and they don't really necessarily have the Kubernetes context, but that might be all you need if you just want to look at runtime and look at file system changes or anything like that. Their tools do that. Yeah. Sweet.
All right.
We're going for a record. Should we just continue for 2 minutes so we hit the hour mark?
Well, we probably don't have a choice because we're done now. We're gonna wrap up. I think we were gonna do Kubesploit last week, and then we were gonna do it this week, and then we realized how much of a, I don't know what you call it. I don't want to say pig. That's negative. How involved it was to show it.
Yeah, I had to get my cluster set up, and I was kind of looking, I like to set up my home cluster with Rancher. Rancher is just one of, I think, the easier tools to get started with, and it's a little bit of a pain. We'll see what happens. I also wanted to throw out, if people wanted to talk about Prometheus Grafana, monitoring, observability, from a security standpoint, if you were going to go into those things, what you would look for, how I would set up my dashboards and my monitoring tools. If that's something you're interested in, let me know, because I know a bunch about that. All right, from back in the old days. There are some really cool plugins.
I would like to see that. So maybe we could stitch you up for next week. We can do that. I think the other one I'm curious to bring onto the show, and maybe if you can, I don't know, sweet talk Dan Pop, he would come on. But if he won't, Alex Ellis did an awesome article about running Falco on K3S on the Pi on ARM. And I'm like, I'm like, ooh. So I burned out I re-flashed all my Pis today, and I'm going to give that a go. So if I get it done by next week or the week after, I'm going to have that. So,
well, if you're looking, so I'll talk to Dan Pop, because if you're looking for something to do, June 1st is the CNCF Canada Cloud Native Meetup, and Dan's going to be on there along with myself. So you'll see some Falco there with him. I'll swindle him into trying to come on here and talk Falco as well. If not, I have a couple other Falco people. But yeah, I'd love to have them on. I'm a big fan of Falco. So that's one. I think we have a bunch in the backlog. I know people were asking for OPA demonstration.
Yep, that won't be a problem. I can get Anders, who is the advocate for Styra, wrote a wonderful blog that came out today about that. So he's a very cool guy. We can get him on.
All right, bunch in the backlog. I'm gonna try to aim for Prometheus and Grafana next week. We'll talk high availability metrics, a little bit of maybe file system monitoring in Grafana, and I'll show you kind of how to navigate it all.
And some best practice around where to stick your Grafana.
Oh yeah, we can't say best practice, or we'll end up in a worst article of
that's true.
of all time.
Worst tooltip ever.
Yeah.
All right. Excellent. That's the end of the show. We did it. We made it to an hour.
We made it to an hour, and thanks for sticking around with us, everyone. And we'll see you next week, same time, 12 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. GMT. I'm Mike Foster.
I'm Steve Jaguar.
Thanks for joining.